For 100 years, we wrote the books of physics on 4 fundamental forces, the unshakable rules that govern the universe. We were wrong. So, terribly wrong. The giant colliders at CERN have spoken, and they have shattered everything we thought we knew. Because the W boson, with 7 sigma certainty, turned out to be heavier than it should be. This is why the universe's expansion rate split in 2 with an impossible 9% difference. And it turned out that everything we knew was only 5% of the universe. But the real shock was that all these anomalies point to one thing: a 5th force. This discovery leads us to a deeper question. If you too want to witness these moments, where physics as we know it comes to an end, hit the like button and subscribe. Because this new force could be a doorway, leading us to a secret dark dimension. Are you ready? Here we go. For years, we thought the universe was governed by only 4 fundamental forces. These were the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, and gravity. The scientific world believed in a model of the universe built on these 4 pillars. So, we built all our equations, all our theories, on these 4 interactions. But recent data from the Large Hadron Collider at CERN has demolished this fundamental understanding, because the findings pointed to something beyond the physics we know. We now understand that the book in which we wrote the most basic rules of the universe might be incomplete. Perhaps we are just now discovering its most important chapter. This is why we first need to understand the Standard Model. The Standard Model, in its simplest definition, is the particle alphabet of the universe. It is a rule book that describes the basic building blocks of everything you see, touch, and feel, and how they talk to each other. This book contains only 17 fundamental particles, 6 types of quarks, 6 types of leptons, and 4 force particles that carry the interactions between them. This is why we call them bosons. And finally, there is that famous Higgs boson, which gives everything its mass. This model is incredibly successful because it has predicted thousands of experiments with almost flawless precision. For example, the mass of the Higgs boson was predicted to be about 125 billion electron volts. And it was found at that exact value. This was like looking for a specific needle in a haystack. But this model has a colossal problem, because it only explains 5% of the universe. So what about the other 95%? The Standard Model is completely silent on this. This is why for years, scientists have been searching for the truth behind this silence. This silence is actually the universe's greatest secret. But what is truly shocking is what this 95% is made of. Physicists call it the dark universe. It consists of 2 interconnected but different components: dark matter and dark energy. Dark matter makes up about 27% of the universe. It doesn't reflect light. It doesn't absorb light. So, we cannot see it directly. We only know of its existence from its gravitational effects. For instance, galaxies are spinning much faster than expected. The only thing that can explain this rotation speed is the existence of a massive and invisible mass. This is like not being able to see the wind, but understanding its existence from the moving trees. Dark energy, on the other hand, is much stranger, because it makes up about 68% of the universe, and It is the repulsive force responsible for the accelerating expansion of the universe. This is the exact opposite of gravity. While gravity tries to pull everything together, dark energy pushes everything apart. This is why our universe is constantly expanding. These figures are not just ordinary numbers. These numbers show that the matter we know and understand, that is, atoms, down at stars, planets, you and me, are just a small foam within the universe. See, the real ocean, Hades, is dark and unknown. This situation confronts physicists with a fundamental question. If the standard model does not explain this massive dark ocean, then what laws of physics apply there? It is at this very point that the idea of a fifth fundamental force comes into play. This idea is revolutionary. Because, if it is true, it means the end of the standard model. The idea that four fundamental forces govern the universe would become history. So, what is this fifth force? We don't know for sure yet. But anomalies in places like the LCB experiment at CERN are providing strong clues to its existence. In these experiments, scientists study how certain particles called beauty quarks decay. The standard model predicts that these quarks should decay into electrons and muons at a specific ratio. However, the experimental results say something else. The results show that the decay into muons is about 15% rarer than expected. This may seem like a small deviation, but in physics, such a discrepancy is a massive crack. This crack indicates that a new particle or a new force we don't know about is interfering with the system. This is why scientists are in a state of great excitement. Because this new force could be a bridge between our visible universe and that vast dark ocean. Perhaps it is a kind of translator that allows dark matter and normal matter to communicate with each other. If this fifth force exists, then the universe is not just more complex, but also a much more interconnected place than we ever imagined. So, now everything is coming together. Well, we have a model that explains only 5% of the universe. Then, we have a massive 95% dark reality that this model completely ignores. And now we are hearing whispers of a mysterious force that could bridge these two worlds. But how could this be possible if such a force exists? Why have we never noticed it before? Where were all these particles, these dark dimensions, hiding? When the scientists at CERN cracked open the door to this hidden world, what they found was not just a new particle, but a truth that fundamentally shakes everything we thought we knew about the universe. Because this new force might be a messenger, leaking from beyond our own dimension. Because this new force might be a messenger, leaking from beyond our own dimension. See, because there is strong evidence that the universe is not limited to the 3 dimensions we perceive. This is why scientists believe the mysterious deviations discovered could actually be traces of an energy leaking from higher dimensions. This points not just to a new force, but to a discovery that completely changes the fabric of reality. Because, if this is true, the universe we live in might be just a thin membrane on a much larger structure. This is why we must look more closely at the concept of the X-17 particle, considered the carrier of this mysterious force. This particle was first observed by Hungarian scientists during the decay of beryllium-8 nuclei. According to the standard model, the electron-positron pairs that emerge during this process should separate at a specific angle. But in the experiments, there is an unexpected bump. an accumulation was detected at an angle of 140 degrees. This deviation pointed to the existence of a new, unknown particle with a mass of about 17 mega-electron volts. This particle is about 33 times heavier than an electron. But it is much lighter than a proton. Scientists named this new particle X17 because its mass was around 17 mega-electron volts, and its nature was a complete mystery. So why is this discovery so important? Because X17 might represent a protophobic force, effective only over very short distances between protons and neutrons. This is unlike any of the known forces, because this force interacts only with certain subatomic particles, while almost completely ignoring electrons. This is why X17 could be our first concrete gateway to the vast dark part of the universe. But behind this gate, there may be not just new particles, but new dimensions hidden as well. The concept of extra dimensions or dark dimensions is one of the most radical theories physicists use to explain why gravity is so weak. Think of it this way. A refrigerator magnet can hold a piece of paper against the gravitational pull of the entire planet Earth. This is why gravity is 10 to the power of 36 times weaker than electromagnetism. To explain this huge gap, scientists argue that gravity does not actually belong entirely to our three-dimensional universe. According to this theory, gravity leaks into a higher dimensional space called the bulk. This is why we only feel a very small part of it. String theory predicts that the universe should actually have 10 or 11 dimensions. However, these dimensions are so small that it is impossible for us to notice them. To imagine a dimension, think of an ant on a strand of hair. The ant sees the hair as a straight line going forward and backward. But, on closer inspection, there is also a circular dimension that wraps around the hair. The extra dimensions in our universe could be similarly curled up at the Planck scale, about 10 to the power of minus 35 meters. This is why the collisions at CERN are so important. Because, at these immense energy levels, particles can leak into these hidden dimensions, or show us effects from there. The fifth force, Ars, perhaps, is a whisper from these hidden dimensions. Because this whisper leads us to a completely new area of physics, a region called the dark sector. Most people think that dark matter is a single type of particle. But why should it be, if the universe we see is made of dozens of different particles and forces? Why would the dark universe be uniform? This is why physicists believe that dark matter may also have its own periodic table. Dark atoms, dark chemistry, and even dark light. This is where the concept of the dark photon comes in. Dark photons are the dark versions of the light we know. But they don't interact with us like normal light. They only establish a very weak connection with normal matter through a portal. Like the fifth force, we know that the amount of dark matter in the universe is 5 times greater than normal matter. So, the dark sector might actually form the main body of the universe. We are just a small gear visible from the outside of this huge machine. The fifth force could be the missing gear between these two worlds. Because, without it, we will never fully understand why the universe is expanding so fast or how galaxies hold together. This new force is not just a physics equation. It is an answer to the deepest origins of our existence. So, we now have a much more comprehensive picture. We have a concrete candidate like the X17 particle, We have an extra dimensions theory that explains the weakness of gravity. And we have a dark sector model that describes the internal complexity of dark matter. These three concepts fit together like a key that could solve the biggest deadlocks of modern physics. Because each one invites us to leave the safe but incomplete harbor of the standard model and venture into the deep waters of the unknown. Scientists are no longer just asking, "What is out there?" They are asking, "How much deeper does it go?" But the time has come to move beyond all these theoretical discussions, because we are curious to see how these massive ideas on paper look in the cold, hot, grey reality of the laboratory. What exactly are the latest experiments conducted in CERN's massive tunnels, 100 meters underground, telling us? And what awaits us when the hoped-for great discovery confronts the real results? Because the data shows more clearly than ever that the physics we know is on the verge of a major collapse. Because the pillars we once called unshakable are now cracking one by one under the weight of laboratory results. And now comes the real shock. Because the signals coming from CERN to Hungary, from Fermilab to the most remote corners of the universe, all converge at a single point. This is why it is time to set the theories aside and face the shattering truths of the real world. And here are the results that change everything. The LHCb data was impossible. But there it was. In a corner of the massive tunnel at CERN, the decay of beauty quarks was being watched. According to the standard model, nature was supposed to be impartial, because these quarks were supposed to transform into electrons and muons at the exact same rate. We call this lepton universality. But the results proved this wrong, because the rate of muon appearance was about 15% lower compared to electrons. The probability of this deviation being a coincidence was measured at a 3.1 sigma level. This means a probability of about 1 in a million. The world of physics was shaken by this number, because it showed that nature was favoring a specific particle. This is why scientists understood that this difference could only be created by an unknown force. This force was interfering with the formation of moons. This is like a loaded die coming up the same every time. If this result reaches the 5 sigma level, it will officially mean the discovery of a new law of physics. Because this finding screams that a fifth force must be added to the 4 fundamental forces of the universe. But the news from Hungary was much more radical. Because the team at the Atom Key Laboratory encountered a ghost while studying the nuclei of excited beryllium-8 atoms. This ghost was unlike anything we knew. In the experiment, the angle between the electron and positron pairs emerging during nuclear decay was measured. See, according to the laws of physics, the number of particles should decrease as the angle increases. But at an angle of exactly 140 degrees, an unexpected accumulation was observed. Was this a mistake? Scientists thought so. So, they repeated the experiment with helium atoms. But shockingly, the same bump appeared in helium at an angle of 115 degrees. This was evidence of a new particle with a mass of exactly 17 mega-electron volts. This particle was 34 times more massive than an electron. This particle was neither a quark nor a boson. So, we named it X17. This particle should not have existed, because there was no place for it in the standard model. But it was there, and it was acting like a messenger between dark matter and normal matter. This pointed not just to a new force, but to an entirely new class of particles, and now we accelerate. Because the muon G2 experiment at Fermilab raised the bar even higher. Muons are the heavy cousins of the electron, and they act like tiny magnets. The strength of these magnets, at K, their magnetic moment, is determined by their interaction with particles in the quantum vacuum. The Standard Model calculates this strength with incredible precision. But the measurements made in a giant magnetic ring, 15 meters in diameter, at Fermilab, demolished the theory. The muons were wobbling more than expected. The difference was a deviation of only 0.00000000251 units. Does this number seem small to you? But Tiarti, you are wrong. For physicists, as Kao, this is a catastrophe. Because this deviation means the muon is being pushed by invisible, hidden particles. The margin of error for this result was calculated at 4.2 sigma. This shows we are just one step away from the 5 sigma discovery threshold. Because empty space is not actually empty. There is a fog within it that we do not yet know, and it is likely connected to the fifth force. This is why the muon's unexpected dance is the greatest proof that there is a crack in the fundamental fabric of the universe. Let's go even further. Because even the expansion rate of the universe is telling us something is wrong. We call this the Hubble tension. When we look at the cosmic microwave background, radiation from the beginning of the universe, we measure an expansion rate of 67.4 kilometers per second per megaparsec. But when we look at modern galaxies and supernovae, this number suddenly jumps to 73.5. The difference is exactly 9%. This was impossible, because the universe was supposed to expand according to a single rulebook. This speed difference shows that something has changed in the universe's 13.8 billion year history. This is why scientists suspect a hidden energy, a fifth force, is making the universe expand so rapidly. Perhaps this force is leaking from an invisible dimension, inflating the universe from the outside like a balloon. This cannot be just an error in our telescopes, because, both measurement methods are extremely consistent within themselves. This is why this massive gap suggests that our most fundamental assumption about the universe, the idea of a one-dimensional expansion, might be wrong. The findings are on the table. The wobble of muons, the missing decay of quarks, the mysterious bump of X17, and the inconsistent expansion rate of the universe. They all lead to the same door. The Standard Model can no longer bear this load. Because each of these anomalies represents a gap that the 4 fundamental forces cannot explain. But the real question is this: how can so many different and seemingly independent phenomena converge at a single point? If there is a single mysterious force behind all these deviations, where is its source? Scientists are no longer just looking at the subatomic. They are turning their eyes to the hidden depths of the universe, to those dark and unreachable dimensions, to understand how this mysterious force works. We must first accept an even more shattering truth. Because if the fifth force is real, it is not just a form of energy, but a hidden messenger that travels back and forth between our dimension and another. Because if the fifth force is real, it is not just a form of energy, but a hidden messenger that travels back and forth between our dimension and another. This is why the scientific world is now questioning not just particles, but the very structure of space. Because if this fifth force is leaking from another dimension into our world, it changes everything fundamentally. This leakage could explain why our laws of physics are so helpless at certain points. Because the universe has a much deeper and more complex structure than we thought. And one of the most jarring examples of this complexity is the discovery related to the mass of the W boson. The CDF2 experiment at Fermilab, after 10 years of meticulous work, announced a shocking result. Scientists analyzed 4.2 million W boson samples. According to the standard model, the mass of this particle should be about 80,357 mega-electron volts. But the measurements told a completely different story. The result was 80,433. Does this difference seem very small to you? But you are mistaken, because this deviation has a 7 sigma certainty. This means the probability of the result being an error is not even 1 in a trillion. This discovery was impossible because the W boson is the carrier of the weak nuclear force, and its mass is directly linked to the fundamental balances of the universe. If the W boson is this heavy, it means there is a massive void at the heart of the standard model. This is why scientists were shocked, because this extra mass could be due to a new force or particle we do not yet know interacting with the boson. It was as if an unknown fifth hand was pressing down on the scales. But the signals from the dark world are not limited to mass. The A64 experiment at CERN set out to hunt for ghost particles called Herin dark photons. In the experiment, an electron beam is fired at a fixed target. According to the laws of physics, the total energy coming out after the collision must equal the energy going in. However, a discrepancy was detected in the data. Some of the energy was disappearing because this energy was leaking into a dark sector that we cannot perceive. This missing energy could be carried by a dark photon with a mass about 1 to 1,000 times lower than an electron's. This should not have happened, because energy is neither created from nothing nor destroyed. But yet, if this energy is passing into another dimension, then everything makes sense. This is why scientists believe that dark photons interact with normal light, signals, albeit at a ratio of 1 in a billion. This weak link is a hidden channel to the invisible 95% of the universe. This portal could be the fifth force itself, because this force not only attracts matter, but also allows for energy transfer between dimensions. And even more shattering is the data brought back from the deepest depths of the universe by the James Webb Space Telescope. Webb discovered massive galaxies that formed just 300 to 400 million years after the Big Bang. These galaxies were IM-pulse Cybele, that because mine. According to our current cosmological models, it was physically impossible for such large structures to form in such a short time. The masses of these galaxies were more than 10 billion times that of our Sun. This was like a baby being born the size of a full-grown adult. This should not have happened, because gravity is not strong enough to bring matter together so quickly. This is why physicists now need a new explanation. Perhaps a fifth force helped gravity in the first moments of the universe. Perhaps this force accelerated the interaction between dark matter and normal matter, causing these massive galaxies to appear suddenly. This discovery completely threw out our models of early universe evolution. Because what Webb saw was not just old galaxies, but a time break where our laws of physics went bankrupt. Now every piece is falling into place. The unexpected weight of the W boson, the mysterious leakage of dark photons, and the impossible existence of massive galaxies in the early universe. None of these can be a coincidence, because each one starts where the limits of the four fundamental forces end. Until now, the scientific world had treated these anomalies as isolated cases. But now we know they are all parts of a bigger picture. The fifth force is no longer a theory on paper, but a scream coming from every corner of the universe. So, how exactly does this force work? How does it push or pull matter? And most importantly, why were we unable to detect it for so long? The answer to these questions is hidden in a complex mechanism that will take us from the deepest parts of the atom to the dark dimensions of the universe. Because, if we understand this mysterious mechanism, we will redefine not just physics, but reality itself. If we understand this mysterious mechanism, we will redefine not just physics, but reality itself. But Taddy, to understand how this mechanism works, we must first look at the strange dance of particles, the technical details of the fifth force. This is why it is now time to slow down the tempo a bit and enter the kitchen of this mysterious interaction. Because the emerging data is not just proof of its existence, but also a technical roadmap to the mechanism of this force. But Tan, to read this roadmap, we must go beyond the physical processes we are used to. Because the technical details are the only way to understand why this force was able to hide for so long, and why it is emerging now. The first of these mechanisms is a process called vector boson exchange. To understand this process, you can imagine two people on ice skates throwing a heavy ball at each other. The person who throws the ball is pushed backward by the recoil. The person who catches the ball is also pulled backward by this push. Forces between particles are transmitted through carrier particles, just like this ball. This is why every fundamental force has a messenger. Photons carry electromagnetism, and gluons carry the strong nuclear force. But when it comes to the fifth force, this messenger is a new and unusual vector, boson, like X17. This particle travels back and forth between protons and neutrons in the atomic nucleus, creating a new field of interaction. When we look at the physical details, we see that this process operates according to a rule called the Yukawa potential. This rule determines how far a force can act, because the greater the mass of a force carrier, the shorter its range. The mass of the X17 particle was measured to be about 17 mega-electron volts. This value is about 33 times greater than the mass of an electron. But it is much smaller than the mass of a proton. This mass value indicates that the effect of the fifth force is limited to atomic scales of only 10 to the power of minus 14 to 10 to the power of minus 15 meters. This is why we do not feel this force in everyday life. Say because this force speaks only within the incredibly narrow confines of the atomic nucleus. This mechanism is much more selective compared to older methods. Classical gravity is universal. It acts on everything, at all distances, CERN, at all times. But this new vector boson prefers to interact only with specific particles. For example, only with quarks. We call this a protophobic interaction, because this force almost completely ignores electrons. This is why it was not possible for us to notice this force in the precise electromagnetic measurements we have made so far. If this force were as general as electromagnetism, we would have noticed it billions of years ago. But, thanks to its selectivity, it has managed to hide in the fine cracks of the laws of physics, because, it only dances with particles that accept its own rules. The second important technical mechanism is kinetic mixing. You can think of this like the frequencies of two different radio stations mixing together. On one side, you have the photons, the carriers of the light we know, and on the other, you have the dark photons, the ghost particles of the dark sector. These two particles would normally never see each other. But thanks to the strange rules of quantum mechanics, these two wavelengths can leak into each other, albeit very slightly. This is why dark matter establishes a very weak connection with our world through this leakage. This mixing allows the fifth force to open this secret portal between the dark and the light worlds. The physical detail of this process is measured by a mixing parameter called epsilon. Scientists estimate this value to be between 10 to the power of -3 and 10 to the power of -12, meaning it is incredibly small. These numbers show how rarely the interaction occurs. For example, the strength of a standard electromagnetic interaction is determined by the fine structure constant called alpha. But the strength of this new force is billions of times less than this value. This is why dark photons leave no trace, even though trillions of them pass through us every second, because this kinetic mixing is so weak that it only becomes visible as a statistical deviation in massive detectors and after billions of collisions. So why is this mechanism so effective? Yes, because it transforms dark matter from a dead mass into an active player. In old theories, dark matter interacted only through gravity. But thanks to kinetic mixing, dark matter can now carry a charge. This is why the massive bulk that makes up 95% of the universe is now starting to speak to us in a physical language. This mechanism provides the missing link that could explain why galaxies do not fly apart and why the universe is expanding differently than expected. Because this leakage is the only bridge that connects the two sides of the universe. The third and perhaps most fascinating mechanism is the theory of chameleon fields. According to this theory, the fifth force changes its properties depending on the density of the matter around it. So just as a chameleon changes its color according to the ground, this force is very long range and strong in empty space. But in a dense environment like Earth, it reduces its range to less than a millimeter. This is why it virtually hides when we try to measure it in the lab. But in the boundless emptiness of space, it transforms into a massive force, powerful enough to push galaxies away from each other. Because this force gains a mass that is inversely proportional to the mass density around it. Physically, this is explained by the potential energy of a scalar field. In empty space, the mass of this field drops to almost zero. Zero mass means the range of the force is theoretically infinite. This is why this force can compete with gravity in a vacuum. But in a dense medium, for example, in a lead block or the Earth's atmosphere, the mass of this field increases rapidly. This increase narrows the range of the force to about 0.1 millimeters. This figure is equivalent to 1% of the thickness of a human hair. This is why searching for the fifth force in laboratory experiments is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Because even the density of the experimental setup causes the force to shut itself down. This mechanism perfectly explains why gravity is sometimes miscalculated. Our old method, Einstein's general theory of relativity, assumes that gravity works according to the same rule everywhere. But chameleon fields introduce a concept of environmental physics. This is why we can now understand why stars on the outer edges of galaxies rotate faster, or because that is a more empty space, so the fifth force is felt more strongly. This mechanism is the most clever solution developed to solve the dark energy puzzle, because it integrates the repulsive force that expands the universe into the system without violating local laws of physics. Finally, we must look at the mechanism of leakage from extra dimensions. According to this theory, our three-dimensional universe is actually a membrane on a higher dimensional structure. Unlike other forces, gravity has the ability to spread across all dimensions. This is why gravity appears so weak in our dimension, because it leaks most of its strength into other dimensions. The fifth force is the reverse of this leakage. It is an energy flowing from other dimensions into our dimension. This disrupts the energy balances in our universe, creating anomalies beyond the laws we know. The physical details here are based on the huge gap between the Planck scale and the electroweak scale. There is a factor of 10 to the power of 16 between these two scales. This gap is known in modern physics as the hierarchy problem. The fifth force can close this gap depending on the radius of the extra dimension. If the extra dimensions are about 0.1 millimeters in size, this leakage reaches a level we can perceive. This is why the energy that disappears in CERN collisions is not actually being destroyed. It is just leaking into these micro dimensions. Even if the strength of this leakage is about 1/billionth of the forces we know, it is enough to change everything on a universal scale. As you can see, the fifth force is not just an extra push. It is a multi-layered mechanism woven with the selectivity of vector bosons, the kinetic mixing of the dark sector, the clever hiding of chameleon fields, and the leakage from extra dimensions. But to understand what a monster this system turns into, we must also examine how particles interact not just with their mass, but with their quantum charges. Because, although the mechanisms we just mentioned explain the physical existence of the fifth force and how it hides, they did not show exactly how it works with the vast dark fabric of the universe. This is why we will now focus on the deeper and more technical aspects of this force. Those invisible whispers of the particle world. Another of these mechanisms is the interaction that occurs through axion-like particles, or ALPs. You can think of this process like a very special whistle that only two people in a crowded and noisy room know, even if thousands of people are talking in that room. Only these two people who know each other hear that special whistle and act accordingly. Axion-like particles are just like this special whistle. They almost never talk to normal matter. But they establish a very special communication channel between the dark and visible matter. This is why these particles are considered the most mysterious messengers of the fifth force. These messengers are ghost-like entities that appear in the subatomic world to maintain balances called CP symmetry. When we look at the physical details, we see that the mass of these particles is incredibly small. The mass of axion-like particles is generally between 10 to the power of -1 and 10 to the power of -6 electron volts. This is about 10 to the power of 18 times smaller than the mass of an electron. Being light allows them to easily spread over very long distances in the universe, even into intergalactic space. Meanwhile, a value called the coupling constant determines how strongly this whisper is heard. Scientists estimate this constant to be on the scale of about 10 to the power of 9 giga-electron volts. This huge energy scale explains why the fifth force is so weak, yet so effective. Because this force is a phenomenon that emerges as a result of very high energy processes, but leaves only a very faint trace in our low energy world. This mechanism is much more dynamic compared to our old models, like standard gravitational models. Classical gravity is static and depends only on mass. But the fifth force carried by axion-like particles can also change depending on the spin of the particles, i.e., their direction of rotation. This is why the gravitational force between two particles depends not only on how heavy they are, but also on which direction they are spinning. This creates a deviation of about 10 to the power of -9 in Newton's gravitational calculations. While this deviation seems almost impossible to measure in a laboratory, it makes a huge difference in extremely dense environments like neutron stars, because this spin-dependent force becomes dominant in the most extreme states of matter, bending the known laws of physics. So, why is this mechanism so effective? Because it fills the strong CP problem, which could not explain why the atomic nucleus is so stable. Without this mechanism, the balances within atoms would be very different, and perhaps we would not be here today. The fifth force, through axions, is performing a kind of fine-tuning on the universe. Another important mechanism is the change in physical constants through dilaton fields. You can think of this as an orchestra conductor very slightly changing the tempo in the middle of a piece. The listeners don't notice. But the duration and speed of each note are readjusted according to that tempo. Dilaton fields are like the conductors of the universe. They microscopically change the values we thought were constant, like the speed of light, the gravitational constant, or the charge of an electron, according to the density of the environment. This is why the fifth force is not just a push or pull force, but also a field that bends the rules of the universe. This theory is one of the strongest mechanisms predicted, especially by string theory. The physical detail of this process can be traced through the fine structure constant alpha. Normally, this constant is about 1/137. However, it is predicted that this value could change by a factor of 1 in a billion under the influence of the fifth force. In laboratory experiments, the precision of atomic clocks is used to investigate whether this change is on the level of 10 to the power of -15 to 10 to the power of -17 per year. These numbers describe changes in time intervals as small as 1/quadrillionth of a second. This is why the effect of dilaton fields changes nothing in our daily lives. But in the first seconds of the universe, when matter was just forming, these fields were much stronger. This is why the laws of physics operated at a very different tempo back then compared to today. When we compare this mechanism with old models, we see a direct challenge to Einstein's equivalence principle. According to Einstein, every object, regardless of its mass or composition, falls with the same acceleration in a vacuum. But dilaton fields create a small difference in this acceleration depending on the atomic structure of the object. We call this difference the Ertwers parameter, et-a, and in the presence of the fifth force, this parameter is not zero. Experiments suggest that this value could show a deviation of about 10 to the power of -13. This means one of the most fundamental cornerstones of classical physics is shaken. Because, in this case, gravity becomes a force that does not treat everyone exactly the same, but has small personal surprises. As you can see, the silent whispers of axions, the variable tempo of dilatants, are the most vital gears of the fifth force's complex machine. Yet these technical details prove to us that the universe is not just what we see, and that a massive engineering marvel lies beneath every atom and every galaxy. When all these mechanisms come together, the fifth force is no longer just a possibility, but an inevitable reality. But yet, what is truly exciting is that this system, which seems so technical and complex, actually serves a single purpose: to achieve the grand unification of the universe. Because all these paths lead us to a single point: the pinnacle of physics. This is why it is now time to set all these pieces aside and focus on what the discovery of this force means for human history and science. The grand finale. Because the view that emerges at the point where everything converges. Because all these paths lead us to a single point: the pinnacle of physics. This is why it is now time to set all these pieces aside and focus on what the discovery of this force means for human history and science. The grand finale. Because behind all the technical details, complex formulas, and silent whispers lies a colossal truth. But this is not just a discovery. This is the greatest paradigm shift in human history. Because everything we thought we knew has just been annihilated by a single piece of information echoing from the deep darkness of the universe. This is why we are turning the tempo up to the maximum. Because we are at the summit now. It is time to walk on the very edge of physics. Because what you are about to hear will not just shake the universe, yes, but your very perception of reality. Fasten your seatbelts, is because we are entering the most epic, most shattering, and most incredible moments in science. There is no turning back now, because the truth, in all its glory, is standing right in front of us. This figure is equivalent to 1% of the thickness of a human hair. This is why searching for the fifth force in laboratory experiments is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Because even the density of the experimental setup causes the force to shut itself down. This mechanism perfectly explains why gravity is sometimes miscalculated. Our old method, Einstein's general theory of relativity, assumes that gravity works according to the same rule everywhere. But Cat's chameleon fields introduce a concept of environmental physics. This is why we can now understand why stars on the outer edges of galaxies rotate faster, or because that is a more empty space, so the fifth force is felt more strongly. This mechanism is the most clever solution developed to solve the dark energy puzzle, because it integrates the repulsive force that expands the universe into the system without violating local laws of physics. Finally, we must look at the mechanism of leakage from extra dimensions. According to this theory, our three-dimensional universe is actually a membrane on a higher dimensional structure. Unlike other forces, gravity has the ability to spread across all dimensions. This is why gravity appears so weak in our dimension, because it leaks most of its strength into other dimensions. The fifth force is the reverse of this leakage. It is an energy flowing from other dimensions into our dimension. This disrupts the energy balances in our universe, creating anomalies beyond the laws we know. The physical details here are based on the huge gap between the Planck scale and the electroweak scale. There is a factor of 10 to the power of 16 between these two scales. This gap is known in modern physics as the hierarchy problem. The fifth force can close this gap depending on the radius of the extra dimension. If the extra dimensions are about 0.1 millimeters in size, this leakage reaches a level we can perceive. This is why the energy that disappears in CERN collisions is not actually being destroyed. It is just leaking into these micro dimensions. Even if the strength of this leakage is about 1/billionth of the forces we know, it is enough to change everything on a universal scale. As you can see, the fifth force is not just an extra push. It is a multi-layered mechanism woven with the selectivity of vector bosons, the kinetic mixing of the dark sector, the clever hiding of chameleon fields, and the leakage from extra dimensions. But to understand what a monster this system turns into, we must also examine how particles interact not just with their mass, but with their quantum charges. Because, although the mechanisms we just mentioned explain the physical existence of the fifth force and how it hides, they did not show exactly how it works with the vast dark fabric of the universe. This is why we will now focus on the deeper and more technical aspects of this force. Those invisible whispers of the particle world. Another of these mechanisms is the interaction that occurs through axion-like particles, or ALPs. You can think of this process like a very special whistle that only two people in a crowded and noisy room know, even if thousands of people are talking in that room. Only these two people who know each other hear that special whistle and act accordingly. Axion-like particles are just like this special whistle. They almost never talk to normal matter. But they establish a very special communication channel between the dark and visible matter. This is why these particles are considered the most mysterious messengers of the fifth force. These messengers are ghost-like entities that appear in the subatomic world to maintain balances called CP symmetry. When we look at the physical details, we see that the mass of these particles is incredibly small. The mass of axion-like particles is generally between 10 to the power of -1 and 10 to the power of -6 electron volts. This is about 10 to the power of 18 times smaller than the mass of an electron. Being light allows them to easily spread over very long distances in the universe, even into intergalactic space. Meanwhile, a value called the coupling constant determines how strongly this whisper is heard. Scientists estimate this constant to be on the scale of about 10 to the power of 9 giga-electron volts. This huge energy scale explains why the fifth force is so weak, yet so effective. Because this force is a phenomenon that emerges as a result of very high energy processes, but leaves only a very faint trace in our low energy world. This mechanism is much more dynamic compared to our old models, like standard gravitational models. Classical gravity is static and depends only on mass. But the fifth force carried by axion-like particles can also change depending on the spin of the particles, their direction of rotation. This is why the gravitational force between two particles depends not only on how heavy they are, but also on which direction they are spinning. This creates a deviation of about 10 to the power of -9 in Newton's gravitational calculations. While this deviation seems almost impossible to measure in a laboratory, it makes a huge difference in extremely dense environments like neutron stars, because This spin-dependent force becomes dominant in the most extreme states of matter, bending the known laws of physics. So, why is this mechanism so effective? Because it fills the strong CP problem, which could not explain why the atomic nucleus is so stable. Without this mechanism, the balances within atoms would be very different, and perhaps we would not be here today. The fifth force, through axions, is performing a kind of fine-tuning on the universe. Another important mechanism is the change in physical constants through dilaton fields. You can think of this as an orchestra conductor very slightly changing the tempo in the middle of a piece. The listeners don't notice. But the duration and speed of each note are readjusted according to that tempo. Dilaton fields are like the conductors of the universe. They microscopically change the values we thought were constant, like the speed of light, the gravitational constant, or the charge of an electron, according to the density of the environment. This is why the fifth force is not just a push or pull force, but also a field that bends the rules of the universe. This theory is one of the strongest mechanisms predicted, especially by string theory. The physical detail of this process can be traced through the fine structure constant alpha. Normally, this constant is about 1/137. However, it is predicted that this value could change by a factor of 1 in a billion under the influence of the fifth force. In laboratory experiments, the precision of atomic clocks is used to investigate whether this change is on the level of 10 to the power of -15 to 10 to the power of -17 per year. These numbers describe changes in time intervals as small as 1/quadrillionth of a second. This is why the effect of dilaton fields changes nothing in our daily lives. But in the first seconds of the universe, when matter was just forming, these fields were much stronger. This is why the laws of physics operated at a very different tempo back then compared to today. When we compare this mechanism with old models, we see a direct challenge to Einstein's equivalence principle. According to Einstein, every object, regardless of its mass or composition, falls with the same acceleration in a vacuum. But dilaton fields create a small difference in this acceleration depending on the atomic structure of the object. We call this difference the Ertwer's parameter, et-a, and in the presence of the fifth force, this parameter is not zero. Experiments suggest that this value could show a deviation of about 10 to the power of -13. This means one of the most fundamental cornerstones of classical physics is shaken. Because, in this case, gravity becomes a force that does not treat everyone exactly the same, but has small personal surprises. As you can see, the silent whispers of axions, the variable tempo of dilatons, are the most vital gears of the fifth force's complex machine. And these technical details prove to us that the universe is not just what we see, and that a massive engineering marvel lies beneath every atom and every galaxy. When all these mechanisms come together, the fifth force is no longer just a possibility, but an inevitable reality. But yet, what is truly exciting is that this system, which seems so technical and complex, actually serves a single purpose: to achieve the grand unification of the universe. Because all these paths lead us to a single point, the pinnacle of physics. This is why it is now time to set all these pieces aside and focus on what the discovery of this force means for human history and science. The grand finale. Because the view that emerges at the point where everything converges. Because all these paths lead us to a single point, the pinnacle of physics. This is why it is now time to set all these pieces aside and focus on what the discovery of this force means for human history and science. The grand finale. Because behind all the technical details, complex formulas, and silent whispers lies a colossal truth. But this is not just a discovery. This is the greatest paradigm shift in human history. Because everything we thought we knew has just been annihilated by a single piece of information echoing from the deep darkness of the universe. This is why we are turning the tempo up to the maximum. Because we are at the summit now. It is time to walk on the very edge of physics. Because what you are about to hear will not just shake the universe, yes, but your very perception of reality. Fasten your seatbelts, is because we are entering the most epic, most shattering, and most incredible moments in science. There is no turning back now, because the truth, in all its glory, is standing right in front of us. It was unbelievable, but it was real. The James Webb Space Telescope saw the impossible because, in the darkest corners of the universe, it discovered massive galaxies that had formed just 300 to 400 million years after the Big Bang. These galaxies were nicknamed universe breakers because, according to our current cosmological models, it was physically impossible for such large structures to form in such a short time. The masses of these galaxies were more than 10 billion times that of our Sun. This was the record for the fastest mass accumulation in history. Webb managed to bend time by looking 13.4 billion years into the past. This discovery shattered the theories about the first moments of the universe, because these galaxies had a much higher density and much greater energy than the Milky Way. The scientific world fell silent in the face of this record mass. How could this be possible? Because gravity is not strong enough to bring matter together so quickly. Which theories were demolished? Our dark matter models collapsed. Because none of the current simulations could create such a monster so early in time. The emphasis on impossibility is at its maximum. Because this situation proves that a force beyond the four we know was at work in the first seconds of the universe. The fifth force must have given gravity a massive turbo boost. This is why cosmology books are now a waste of paper. Scientists were in shock. Published papers followed one another. The paradigm shifted completely. To explain the beginning of the universe, the fifth force is no longer an option. It is a necessity, because those massive galaxies are there, and they are telling us, you are wrong. Even more shattering news came from the subatomic world. The muon G2 experiment at Fermilab brought physics to a standstill, because the particle called a muon showed a much faster wobble in a magnetic field than expected. This wobble shattered the limits of the standard model. The experimental results reached a 4.2 sigma certainty. This means the probability of the result being an error is 1 in 40,000. Scientists worked for 20 years to achieve this result. The muon's magnetic moment showed a deviation even at the 11th decimal place. This is the record for the most precise physical measurement in history. But this precision also brought a catastrophe with it, because this deviation proved the existence of a force field around the muon that we do not yet know. The physics world fell silent, because the muon was being pushed by this invisible fifth hand. How could this be? Because the muon is the heavy cousin of the electron and is affected by every breeze in the quantum world. If the muon started to wobble this fast, it indicates a leak in the structure of the universe that we didn't know about. The emphasis on impossibility is now everywhere. Because this deviation is the biggest error in the holy book of physics, the Standard Model. This is why a massive earthquake occurred in the scientific world. When the researchers at Fermilab announced the results, thousands of physicists around the world simultaneously thought one thing: a new physics is being born. Because that tiny particle is whispering the universe's biggest secret. But there was something even bigger. The mass of the W boson changed everything. The CDF2 experiment, after a 10-year data collection process, dropped the bomb. Because this fundamental particle was much heavier than it should be. The measured mass was 80,433 mega-electron volts. Exactly 76 mega-electron volts more than the expected value. This difference may seem small to you, but this difference is a 7 sigma deviation. This is the record for the most certain anomaly in history. Because a deviation of this certainty does not mean a mistake in the laws of physics, but a new world. Scientists examined tens of millions of collisions to reach this conclusion. This was the most comprehensive research ever conducted on the mass of a particle. But the result declared the end of current physics. How could this be possible? Because the W boson is the cornerstone of the weak nuclear force. If it is that heavy, all the balances of the universe are turned upside down. What new questions arose? Why is the mass so much? What is making it heavier? The emphasis on impossibility reached its peak. Because this extra mass proves that the fifth force is directly interacting with this particle. This is why the Standard Model is now incomplete. The earthquake in the scientific world was so great that articles were shared thousands of times in minutes. Physicists could not believe it. But the data does not lie. The W boson is carrying the immense mass of the fifth force, because it is no longer just a particle, but proof of a new physics. We are not slowing down. In the Atom Key Laboratory in Hungary, the real monster awakened. Scientists directly observed the mysterious particle called X17, because the electrons and positrons emerging during the decay of beryllium-8 atoms were separating at an unexpected angle. This angle was exactly 140 degrees. This angle was impossible, because no known law of physics could explain this angle. The mass of the X17 particle was measured at 17 mega-electron volts. This is 34 times more than the mass of an electron. But its effect was felt in the heart of the atom, in that tiny space of 10 to the power of minus 15 meters, on the microscales. This is the clearest candidate for a fifth force carrier in history. The scientific world was stunned by this record deviation. For the first time in history, we had directly caught the messenger of a force. How could this be possible? Because X17 only leaks into the interaction between protons and neutrons. Which theories were demolished? All the foundations of nuclear physics were shaken. Because it was confirmed that not just four forces, but a fifth player was at work in the atomic nucleus. The emphasis on impossibility is at its maximum. Because this particle is the portal itself between dark matter and our world. This is why this discovery is the biggest candidate for a Nobel Prize in physics. Scientists repeated the experiments in shock. The result did not change. X17 is there. and it is opening the doors to a new universe for us. Because that small messenger is the fifth force itself. And now, at top speed, the colossal crisis over the universe's expansion rate. The Hubble constant. Because two different measurement methods are giving completely opposite results. One side measures the speed at 67.4 kilometers per second per megaparsec, while the other measures 73.5. The difference is a full 8%. This cannot be an error, because the certainty in the measurement is at a 5 sigma level. This is the record for the greatest cosmological tension in history. The universe is running away much faster than we thought. This is the biggest contradiction in its 13.8 billion year history. Because this speed difference shows that the engine driving the universe's expansion, the fifth force, is much stronger than expected. How could this be? Because the dark energy that drives the expansion of the universe is the fifth force itself. What new questions arose? Why don't the two different measurements agree? Because we still do not know the real engine of the universe. The emphasis on impossibility is epic. Because this speed difference proves that there is a massive gap in our physical reality. This is why we now need a new cosmology. The scientific world is divided in the face of this crisis. Articles, shots, debates, conflicts. The paradigm has completely shattered because the universe is too fast and mysterious to fit into our mathematical models. We now know that in that void, there is a massive push from the fifth force. And this force is rapidly pushing everything away from each other. This is why everything now comes together. The monster galaxies of Webb, the wild wobble of the muon, the heavy load of the W boson, the mysterious angle of X17, and the terrifying escape velocity of the universe. None of these are independent of each other, because each one is a signature of the fifth force on different layers of the universe. With these 5 epic moments, the scientific world is undergoing the greatest transformation in history. The old physics is over. The 4-force universe is now just a fairy tale, because we have touched the deepest and most powerful layer of reality. But you know what's most exciting? All these discoveries are just the beginning. Because so far, we have only seen the destructive power and mysterious effects of this force. So what does this mean? What are all these data trying to tell us? How will the discovery of the fifth force change our world, our technology, and our future? And most importantly, what will humanity do with this new power? The answers to these questions will take us from the outermost limits of science to an epic vision of the universe's future. Because there is one more piece of this big picture you haven't seen yet. This is why we now understand that the universe does not stand on just 4 pillars, but is governed by a massive, invisible hand that we have never accounted for until now. Because the discovery of this fifth force is not just the discovery of a new particle, it is the reweaving of the fabric of reality. This is why we are now entering the most shattering and fastest turns of this epic journey. Because the remaining epic moments are not just laboratory results, but massive anomalies that determine the fate of the entire universe. This is why we are keeping the tempo at maximum, because we will now see the immense power of the fifth force everywhere, from the dance of galaxies to the heart of atoms. There is no stopping now, because the truth is coming at us at full speed, and no old theory can stand against this truth. an impossible drift. For the first time in history, we saw that our galaxy and its neighbors are caught in a massive current. The Great Attractor is pulling us towards it. But this pull doesn't fit any of our known models of gravity, because the amount of matter that should be in that region is not enough to explain our speed. We are currently flying towards the unknown at 600 kilometers per second. This speed is 1,700 times the speed of sound. This colossal movement within the Laniakea supercluster is directing us from 250 million light-years away. This is the record for the largest local motion ever observed. How could this be possible? Because there is not enough visible matter to explain such a large mass accumulation. The mass of this gravitational center is 10 to the power of 16 times greater than our Sun. This number defies the limits of imagination. How could this be possible? Because gravity could not create such a clear current over such great distances. Which theories were demolished? The assumption that the universe is homogeneous and expands equally in all directions collapsed. Because we are drifting in a specific direction like a leaf in a giant river. The emphasis on impossibility is at its maximum. Because the only thing that explains this drift is the additional gravitational field created by the fifth force concentrated in that region. This is why even dark matter is not enough to explain this speed. The scientific world was shocked by this cosmic current. The paradigm shifted completely. Now, when we look at the sky, we see not just stars, but the massive river of the fifth force that is pulling us into the unknown. Because this current is the secret map of the universe. But the real shock came from the void itself, the Botas. Void brought physics to the brink of impossibility, because in this massive region, 330 million light-years in diameter, there is almost nothing. Normally, in a region of this size, there should be at least 2,000 galaxies. But we found only 60 galaxies there. This is the record for the largest void ever observed. This void is so large that if the Milky Way were at its center, we would not have even been aware of the existence of other galaxies until the 1960s. Because this void is a massive wound in the fabric of the universe. The volume of this region is 236,000 cubic megaparsecs. This number points to the loneliest region in the known universe. How could this be possible? Because, I'd said, our cosmological models did not allow for matter to be so unevenly distributed throughout the universe. It was like a drop of water being absent for miles in a vast ocean. Which theories were demolished? The cosmological principle, which states that the universe is homogeneous on a large scale, took a heavy blow in the face of this void. It was as if the universe had taken matter from one place and left another empty. The emphasis on impossibility is epic, is because the only thing that can explain this void is that the fifth force created a repulsive effect in that region. Where gravity brought matter together, the fifth force may have dispersed matter, creating this island of immense loneliness. The scientific world was stunned by this void. This was not an anomaly, but a challenge to the fundamental structure of the universe. The paradigm was shaken. We now know that the universe is not only full, but also frighteningly empty. Because the fifth force is not only a unifier, but also a divider. And now, one of the most iconic images in history. The Event Horizon Telescope captured the shadow of a black hole. But the size of the shadow was wrong. It was impossible, because Einstein's general theory of relativity had calculated the size of that ring with millimeter precision. But the black hole refused to comply with these calculations. The mass of this black hole is 6.5 billion solar masses. The diameter of its light ring is 40 billion kilometers. This is the record for the largest and most distant direct observation in history. This black hole is 55 million light-years away from us. But its shadow, right here, is demolishing our theories. How could this be possible? Because, at such a colossal mass, gravity could not make a mistake. Which theories were demolished? Dark black hole models and the no-hair theorem took serious damage. The emphasis on impossibility is at its maximum, because the only thing that could explain this deviation is that the massive plasma rotating around the black hole is being compressed by a fifth force. The fifth force did what gravity could not, and trapped the light in a narrower area. This is why this image is Einstein's greatest test. Scientists were stunned by this data. The paradigm completely shattered. We now know that even in the darkest places of the universe, the light of the fifth force shines. Because even black holes must bow to this new force. This is why everything now comes together. The pulling power of the great attractor, the eerie silence of the Buddha's void, and the theory-breaking shadows of giant black holes. None of these are a coincidence, because each one is a part of the epic show the fifth force is putting on in the universe's grandest stages. With these epic moments, the scientific world has completely abandoned the boundaries of old reality. We now know that we do not live in a simple universe governed by only four forces. We are small witnesses crushed under the massive and mysterious architecture of the fifth force. But these epic moments are preparing us for just one truth. This truth has not only a physical, but also an existential dimension. But now it is time to stop and think, because all these records, all these impossible numbers, and all these shattering discoveries are not just giving us technical information. They are telling us a story. This story is the final point reached in humanity's quest to understand the universe. What remains after all these epic moments? What does the discovery of this massive force mean for us? Is it just a new rule of physics? Or an awakening that will fundamentally change our relationship with the universe? Because we are no longer observers looking at the sky. We are parts of a reality woven with the immense energy of the fifth force. This is why it is now time to leave the cold and fast world of physics and turn to the philosophical depth of this discovery and the great question that touches our souls. How will this new force shape our destiny? And most importantly, what will this great secret tell us about who we are? Because the deepest and most personal part of this journey is just beginning. This is why the most fundamental truth whispered to us by this great secret is that we are not passive observers of this universe, but its most complex and meaningful results. Because the answer to the question of fate lies not in being just numbers within this massive system, but in being the sole consciousness that gives soul to those numbers. The discovery of the fifth force tells us who we are, while also redefining what the universe is. Because, we are both a result of this mysterious force and the explorers who discovered it. This journey into the depths of our minds confronts us not just with a physical force, but with the purest form of our own existence. This is why we now continue to look deeper, to the extremes of these contrasts, to complete the missing colors of this philosophical picture and prepare for the great conclusion that awaits us. On one hand, there is the absolute and invisible dominion of the mysterious fifth force, which governs everything but never directly reveals itself. On the other, Yohai, there is our limited world of perception, trying to grasp reality with only our five senses, inclined to believe what we see and touch. How can a massive power that moves the fundamental building blocks of the universe and galaxies operate so silently and deeply in our daily lives? This is the unbridgeable gap between perception and reality. Because